Defying death and the course of nature is a story as old as time, and one that refuses to die. It is a story that gets retold over and over. Whether it is the quest for eternal life, the consequences that come with it, or a life after death, the story of mankind's struggle against death is far from over. Today, we look at another one of those stories. The story of the narrator from the visual novel game Slay the Princess. This is the story of the narrator, the man who tricked death.
I think you know what I am.
The narrator is one of the two main antagonists of the game. He's the guiding voice who helps you accomplish his goal of slaying the princess, though he won't be on your side if you refuse to follow along with his plan. One might call him a villain, but every villain is a hero of his own story. We'll try to strip away our biases against him, try to piece together the lore of the narrator, and tell the story of the storyteller, his plot to trick death and what became his downfall. Finding or piece together any information on the narrator is a difficult task, what with there being so little we can know about him. Heck, we don't even know his name. All we know is that the narrator, as he's called in the game, is merely an echo of the one who truly tricked death.
I'm an echo. Somebody made you after all, and I'm what's left of him.
The original man, whom I'll refer to as the narrator by lack of a better name, is dead and left behind an echo. But we don't have to take his word for it. If you let the spectre possess you, she will say the following.
So, you're the one who pulled the strings and made me dead. I can tell you don't belong here. You're barely even there, like the shape of something left behind. You're more of a memory than a person.
An echo is defined as a close parallel to an idea, feeling, or event. And that does fit what we see in the game. The echo is a copy the narrator made of his mental state while he was alive. Maybe it was created using technological means, such as mind uploading, or it is a magical afterimage created through arcane practices. But even though he's not really the narrator, we can still learn a lot about him. After all, he does contain almost all of the original narrator's memories and experiences, and we can even pinpoint the moment the echo was created.
She is the shifting mound, the ebb and flow, the capacity to change. She is transformation, or most of it. Her nature is why I had to die, for she becomes that which others perceive her to be. But an echo can't perceive things, not in the way that people can.
When the narrator discovers the shifting mound's effects, he must have made the echo immediately after. Every passing second the narrator was alive, he would be a time bomb, able to end the world with a wrong thought. Similarly, the echo could not have been made before the discovery, as the princess and her true nature did not exist yet. So this information could have never been made into the construct. Thus we can conclude, the echo was made in the narrator's last moments. We know the narrator worked alone while trying to end death, as he never refers to anyone else when talking about the process, nor does he use the word we. That, alongside the highly volatile nature of the process, leads me to believe that he was alone during those final moments. Knowing these details, it is easy to paint the picture of a lone scientist trying to play God and condemning the world to eternal life. The narrator's plot to stop death might appear foolish or stem from an unreasonable fear of death at first glance. But to truly understand the narrator, we must first understand where he came from. The narrator's world probably shares a lot of elements with our own, though we don't even know for certain if people look like humans anymore, as the narrator takes the appearance of a crow within the construct. It is unknown whether he actually looked like a crow during his life, or whether the construct chose this form for him. This is an interesting design, as crows across cultures have symbolised destiny, wisdom and change. Yet in more modern times, thanks to the Black Death, they became known as harbingers of death. These themes do mirror the narrator's own story, but aside from one echo's appearance, we don't know much about the rest of humanity. But we do know one important thing about the world they live in. You see, The story takes place far into the future. How far? Close to the heat death of the universe.
But the bones of the universe are old. It's on the cusp of its dying breath, and the people out there are consumed with thoughts of oblivion.
We don't have to take his word for it though, we can confirm this by digging into the game files. Even the start at the end of the game looks like it's close to dying, and the file name confirms that.
No. In life I was painfully mortal, a witness to the end of days. I held the fear of death in my heart and saw oblivion threaten the very memory of everything I knew and everyone I loved. I needed to do something.
Looking up at the sky and seeing the stars fade out one by one does colour your perspective. After all, it is easy to disregard death's inevitability when it's far away. But when it's near and consumes the thoughts of everyone you hold dear and threatens to take away your loved one, desperation takes hold. The decision to rid the world of death was not born out of arrogance, but out of compassion and necessity.
When the patterns are wiped from the sand, when the board is reset, who will remember them? All I've done is give them a chance to live outside of the shadow of the end.
It would be difficult to say what a world without death looks like. We do hear the narrator say the following.
Burdenless, an eternal pattern of forgetfulness leading into the joys of rediscovery. Everyone will be with the ones they love. No more fear, no more howling chaos. Just life, forever.
A common misconception is that the narrator envisioned the world without change, where time would be frozen. This is not true. As he and the game's own narration state, you also have a small piece of change within yourself, and change will continue to exist in a post-death world, but on a smaller scale. The words used to describe a post-death world could imply a time loop, but without further information we could hardly tell anything about the deathless world, except that he believed for it to be better than Oblivion, and knowing of his compassion, it is hard to blame him for grasping at anything to save the world. There is an ethical concern in how the narrator doesn't consider or ask for permission and forced a decision to end death upon the world's population, but his actions are understandable. After all, if you're on a sinking ship, you first try to stop the boat from sinking, not ask every person if they're alright with being saved. You don't know much about his world. It's possible that society has reached a consensus on the topic, or that societal despair was enough of a permission to force his choice. And, in the words of the narrator, anything is better than Oblivion. So the narrator disappeared. Without a single word he left, for if anyone knew what he was doing, it would all be for nothing. He worked alone, left behind his family and friends, and disappeared off the radar completely. He tore apart the cycle of life and death and shaped it into two gods, the long quiet and the shifting mound. One contains a possible salvation for the world, and the other its inevitable end. The shifting mound contained death in her multitudes, but he himself was unable to end her completely as he wanted. The only one who could was her counterpart. But that wasn't the only problem. The shifting mound's nature as a perception-based creature also threatened the entire world. So the narrator acted quickly, and put the two newly born beings into a construct, created an echo to guide the counterpart's blade, and ended his own life.
There's a cruel irony to it all. The only way I could share my dream with the world was to never be able to see it for myself.
It's all quite messy if you look at it. He broke the cycle but was left with two sentient gods. He has tricked one half the cycle to end its other half and has to end his own life to see his plan come to fruition with no guarantee that it would work. This was not the original plan. He was in over his head and paid the price. So the narrator died in complete obscurity, the world unaware of his sacrifice. The only thing he left behind was an echo inside the construct. A plan that might have worked itself out, but the narrator made a single crucial mistake. The Echo presents itself as a narrator to the Long Quiet, the game's protagonist. It is interesting to see how the narrator interacts with the Long Quiet. He tries to act as both a guiding voice and a companion, but as each playthrough progresses, the Long Quiet becomes more disdainful towards the narrator, as can be seen by the voices who act as his subconscious. At best, the voices are neutral towards the narrator, but the majority of the time they're spiteful. Makes sense. He doesn't treat his creation, the Long Quiet, very well, and almost seems to look down upon him.
Oh, I'm nothing like you.
He treats the Long Quiet like he is merely a blade, a weapon to dispose of death. Yet, for someone who calls himself the narrator, it's ironic he never bothers to tell stories about himself, the outside world, or the people they're trying to save, making it very hard for the Long Quiet to empathise with the world. He only narrates what's important to him, what's right there in front of him. It's one of the many mistakes he makes. A mistake he is bound to repeat. Unlike the Long Quiet, who is capable of changing and growing, the narrator cannot. He forgets every experience he had and is reset back at the start of each route, making it so he can never anticipate or change. Like a book only able to tell a single story. The narrator, unlike the princess and the Long Quiet, is merely an echo. Failing to empathise with his creations, failing to adapt to the story he is writing are a few of the narrator's flaws. But maybe the biggest flaw he made was presenting himself as the narrator and trying to control the story. Because, as all writers know, stories tend to live a life of their own. But maybe there's still a good ending to be found for the narrator. And this is pure speculation. But I like to think that before the narrator split the cycle of life and death, the heat death of the universe will be in its finale. But with his creation of the Princess and the Long Quiet, though his own world faced its end, he also placed a seed for the next one, and the one after, and so forth.